Good day, ma'am. I am Kian called Vistal, and I am currently taking Bachelor of Science in Hospitality Management, Section 3B. Today, I will be discussing the Chapter 1 entitled Introduction in the course Legal Aspects in Tourism and Hospitality. Without further ado, let's get started. But before I start my discussion, let me give first you the learning objectives for today's discussion. First, identify the different kinds of laws relevant to the tourism, travel, and hospitality industry. Second, explain the concept of tourism law. Third, enumerate important sources of tourism law. And lastly, give examples of applications of tourism law. And now, let me first give you the subsections that will be discussed today. First, definition of law. Second, kinds of law. Third, concept of tourism law. Fourth, importance and application of tourism law. And lastly, source of law relevant to travel and hospitality industry. And now let me officially begin my discussion. And now let's define what is law. In its abstract sense, it is the science of moral laws founded on the rational nature of man that governs his free activity for the realization of the individual and social ends, and of life under an aspect of mutual conditional dependence. In its specific and concrete sense, it is defined as the rule of conduct, just and obligatory, promulgated by legitimate authority and of common observance and benefit. So basically, law are the rules and regulations that used to govern and control the behavior of a such person or individual. It is used as a parameters for us to follow so that the society that we or the community that we are living in is at peace and order. There are two kinds of law: the law as to purpose and law as to scope. And now let's tackle first the law as to purpose. There are two branches of law as to purpose, namely substantive law and adjective law. Okay, so what are the difference between substantive law and the adjective law? So if we talk about substantive law, it is a law that creates the right being claimed or crime being prosecuted. While if we talk about adjective law, it is a law that specifies on how the case is to be filed and handled in a court. So that is the difference between substantive law and adjective law, but these two are interconnected in its nature. And now let's proceed to the law as to scope. There are two types of law as to scope, namely general or public law, and the other one is special or private law. And now let's first talk about the general or public law. And now let's talk first about general or public law. So general or public law is defined as a law that is unrestricted as to time. It's applicable throughout the entire territory, subjects to the power of the legislature that enacted it, and applies to all persons in the same class, called also General Act or General Statute. Public law that handles law between government and individual. Under the general or public law are the criminal law, international law, and political law. These three branches of general or public law will be tackled later on. Now let's define what is criminal law. Criminal law is a law dealing with crimes and their punishment, as well as the procedure for that purpose. So basically, criminal law is the body of law defines criminal offenses, regulates the apprehensions, charging and trial, and fixes penalties and modes of treatments applicable to convicted offenders. These are some of examples of crime under the criminal law, namely robbery, bribery, and cybercrime. And now let's proceed to international law. So international law defined as a body of rules or principles of actions governing the relation between states. So some examples of these international law are war, diplomacy, and human rights. And now let's proceed to the political law. So political law is defined as a law regulating the relations sustained by the inhabitants of a territory to the sovereign. So examples of these are under the political law are the election law and suffrage. Suffrage or right to vote. And now let's proceed to special or private law. So special or private law is defined as a law which relates to particular person or things of class. Special or private law is a branch of law that deals with the rights and duties of private individuals and relations between them. Under the special or private law are the civil law, mercantile law, and the maritime law. And now let's define what is civil law. So civil law is defined as the mass of precepts which determines and regulates those relations of assistance, authority, and obedience existing among members of a family, and those which exist among members of a society for a protections of private interest. So basically, civil law is a law that governs family and property relations in the Philippines. Some of the cases under civil law are property damage and defamation. So let's talk about the property damage. For example, there is a car accident that destroy one of your property. So you can sue that person under the civil law. And now let's proceed to maritime law. So maritime law is defined as a law dealing with the commerce by sea involving regulations of ships and harbors and the status of seamen. Example case under maritime law is the recent activity of Chinese Coast Guard water cannon the Philippine ships at Ayungin Shoals. And now let's proceed to mercantile law. So mercantile law is defined as the law of commercial transactions derived from the law of merchants, which includes commercial papers, insurance, and other types of agency. Mercantile law is also known as commercial law. And now let's proceed to the concept of tourism law. Tourism law may be defined as a body of rule or principles of actions which deals with the regulations, authority, relation, and obedience among members of the society involved in tourist, travel, and accommodation. It includes persons traveling from place to place for pleasure and business establishment or person engaged in the occupations of providing various service for tourists. So tourist law is about, so to make it simple, tourism law is a unique area of law that includes general government, regulation, and specific rules of the travel and hospitality industry. Includes the people, the employees in tourism. And now let's proceed to the importance of and applications of tourism law. So the law of hospitality is important for various reasons, including protecting guests and employees against common violations like health and harassment, problems and ensuring that the hospitality industry develops strategies for better service. In addition, tourism law also plays an important role in cases or situations related to tourism, natural disaster demonstrations, and epidemics, where visitors and tourists must be aware of their rights and the safety precautions that should or could be taken at that time. So it is important to have a tourism law in order for us to be protected, not just the employees but also the tourists, the properties, and anything that connected to the tourism and hospitality industry. And now let's proceed to the sources of law relevant to travel, tourism, and hospitality industry. First, the Philippines Constitutions. So Philippines Constitutions is the fundamental law of the land to which all other laws must be formed. There are three branches of the Philippines Constitution, namely executive, legislative, and judicial. So now let's proceed to number 2, statutes or legislative enactments. It is a written will of the legislative departments rendered authentic by certain prescribed forms and solemnities, prescribing rules of actions or civil conduct with respect to person, things, or both. Examples: Dangerous Act, Public Service Act, Civil Code, Labor Code of the Philippines, Revised Penal Code, and local government ordinances. Number 3, administrative or executive orders, regulations, and rulings. These are issued by administrative officials under legislative authority. Examples: rules and regulations promulgated the Secretary of Tourism governing the accreditations of hotel, tourist inn, motels, apartment, resorts, and all. These administrative or executive orders will serve as a accreditation if that hotel can be accredited or pass the standards that Philippine tourism is looking for. Fourth is judicial decisions or jurisprudence. These refer to the decisions of the Supreme Court in interpreting the laws of the Constitution. Fifth, custom. It is the rule of conduct which in a given place and among given groups of people has been followed for the applicable time. And lastly, other sources. These refers to the decisions of foreign tribunals and opinions of textbooks writers. And that is the end of my discussion. Quotes for today: laws in a country must be enforced fairly and firmly for everyone. Walay dato, walay pobre, dapat pantay-pantay. And that's all. Thank you.